Important thing to kind of facilitate that happening is just the feeling of safeness. And so what does that mean? It means they don't feel judged. It means that you're not giving unsolicited advice. That means that you're not trying to change them. That means that as they're forming their own identity and becoming their own person, that you don't disagree with that. Important.
If you love your kids and still feel like you're losing it sometimes, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Mom Essentials, where we dig into the best and messiest parts of motherhood. I'm Angie Weber, parent coach and creator of the Calm Approach to Parenting. In each episode, you will find real-life support, fresh strategies, and honest conversations to help you build more communication, connection, and calm at home. Together, we will focus on empowerment over perfection. Let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Mom Essentials. If you've ever wondered how to stay calm when the chaos of parenting teens take over, or how to actually build your teens' confidence instead of just crossing your fingers and hope that it all works out, this episode is for you. I'm joined by Laura Ollinger today, who is a teen and parent well-being coach, speaker, and certified parent coach whisperer who helps families move from stress and disconnect to calm, confidence, and connection. She's a mom of 4 teens and uses neuroscience and positive psychology to give families practical tools for building self-worth and resilience at home. Her teen keynote, The Decider, inspires students to believe in their value, focus on what they can control, and make intentional choices about who they want to become. So thank you so much for hanging out with me and my viewers today, Laura.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, well, as we chatted a little bit before we even started hitting record, we have a lot of similarities in our missions and our focus with bringing that calm and confidence and connection into homes. And we kind of work with 2 different age groups. So I'm really excited to get your input on really the teen portion of parenting because that can be really, really stressful. So we know that comes with a ton of chaos, but maybe some people are wondering, well, teens, why would you want to focus on this age group? Because it can be, kind of a battle, but what got you passionate into this work?
Yes, well, even that setup is pretty awesome because, most people kind of freak out when they hear about teenagers or they're like, run and teenage hormones and oh my gosh. But really, I feel like teenagers are extremely misunderstood.
Sure.
They're incredibly sweet. I love all the teenagers that I work with, and I love obviously my own children, but all their friends. They're just a really unique fun. It's just such a fun age group. Like I have eyes to really see the best in them. And I don't focus on the negatives. I don't focus on the hormones because the more you kind of like put this like negative vibe on them, they're like, ooh, you don't like me, so I'm not going to like you, right?
Yeah.
But what got me started was years ago, my daughter was dealing with a lot of anxiety in elementary school. And it really got pretty bad in about 4th grade and increased in 5th grade. And so that's when I started kind of investigating, learning more about it, understanding it. And shortly thereafter, my nephew, who was 20 years old, took his own life at the time. He was 20. And it was just this huge wake-up call because I knew I was going to be coaching. My intention was to just coach moms. And then when that happened and simultaneously, like I said, I was also dealing with all the stress of my daughter. And then of course my own children had their own feelings about their cousin. And so it was just like this whole thing. And I thought, you know what, it felt like meant to be. Like this is where, not meant to be as far as him, but meant to be as far as my calling and my purpose and my mission. And I realized, you know what, I'm going to also have 14 years of my own at some point. So I better get good at this now. And so I just really love, like I said, like seeing what's best. And so my very first client was also just a girl who was very misunderstood by her parents. And so I really like to give them a voice and allow them to share, see what their strengths are, and really focus on their strengths and not focus on the negatives.
Yeah, which I think you bring up a good point here, and I'm sorry to hear about the tragedy in your family too. And unfortunately, that's a very common situation that a lot of families are dealing with. And I don't know if it's just me being naive, but I feel like when I grew up, the word anxiety was not used when I was in fifth grade. I mean, I didn't know what that meant. I felt like that was something that happened, towards like later years of high school and into college and things like that. And so I think these children too are experiencing a lot more of these emotions and this anxiety earlier and earlier on in their growing up. And I think it's so beautiful that you want to help them give a voice, because that's what I talk a lot about with parents who have younger kids of, your child is telling you what they need through their behavior because they don't know how to verbalize it, or they don't really understand what's going on in their body anyways. And I think that's such a comparable thing to teens. There's all these hormones and things are changing, and they're trying to figure out these different dynamics in friendships and possibly romantic relationships, and then the pressure of school and maybe sports, and what are you going to do with the rest of your life type of
Yes.
questions get thrown at them. And so I love that you're giving them this voice and holding this space for them in order to share their feelings, especially if maybe they don't know how to do it.
Yes. And I love kind of like how much you amplified their problem because it is. And on top of the hormones, it's really, you mentioned the idea of rewiring earlier. So like if we're thinking of like the brain is literally a construction project for them, it's getting rewired. So it kind of loses some of the neural connections from early childhood and it starts kind of making space, pruning and all the things, that's happening. And so it's a lot happening. And what a lot of parents don't understand is the way the brain develops as a teenager is the limbic system is the first to continue to expand and grow. And that's where they're having their big emotions. And we know, a lot of people talk about the prefrontal cortex now. It's like a common word, and that's the last to develop. And so it makes sense. That's the brake, right? And so we have all this gas, right? And all these emotions and big feelings, and we don't have anything to stop that. And so many parents just get frustrated and annoyed that their teenager is kind of like on a rant or they're complaining or they're emotional or whatever it is. And they don't understand that, like, literally, they're just wired that way. They don't have another way to express themselves. And so I like to like give a lot of space to just
Yeah.
allow, if they are ranting, and this is kind of maybe another part of the conversation, but are you ranting or do you need a solution, right? That's like the two questions. And so many parents don't understand that their child needs a chance or a place, because if they can't do it with you, you don't want another option for that, right? Right? Like yes, can they complain to their friends, but their friends are dealing with the same problems. So they need somebody else who's kind of outside to be able to just like hold that space and nurture that emotion and just be that safe place for them.
Yeah. And yeah, we were talking about the rewiring stuff a little bit before we got on here. And I also wanted to bring it back because you said kind of about like reflecting the behavior or modeling it, when our kids are seeing how we act, that's how they are going to start processing in their brain of like, when I'm angry, this is what I do because this is what I see mom and dad do. But sometimes we hold these teens and just children in general to these really high standards of, well, you shouldn't act that way, you shouldn't be like that. And then once we take a step back and kind of reflect of like, oh wait, I guess I do that, and that's why they're doing it. I mean, my children are 11, but my daughter acts like she's 16. So, it's so funny that my husband and I will always catch ourselves like wanting to be like, why? Oh, wait. Okay, nope. I can see that we do that too sometimes. Like, so we can't get too mad at them.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to ask you too, like, how does a mom's mindset, for example, or their self-talk really affect everyone else in their home, in their family?
Oh, wow. That's an amazing question. So, so important for a mom to have confidence in herself. And I know that's easier said than done because there's lots of reasons why a mom might not have confidence. But if there's one thing, well, I hate to say if there's one thing because there's probably like 10 things. But if there's one thing that I see in my work in dealing with teenagers and their parents is so many times, especially the daughters, they're lacking self-confidence and self-worth. And you don't have to look very far other than to see how her mom is in her own life and how she feels about herself. And so if there's one thing a mom could do is to just find the value in yourself. Really work on yourself if you haven't done that work. And also find what you like find your preferences. Like there's so many moms who I find fit in that people pleaser category because we're kind of wired to make our families happy. And we're so used to that from the time they're little. Do you want this vanilla or chocolate? And we're all trying to make everybody happy. And if you have a husband or somebody, spouse or co-parent, oh, let's make them happy, right? And then we forget to make ourselves happy. But that is so important for kids to see, whether you have boys or girls. And I have both. I have 2 boys, 2 girls. So I enjoy the fact that I am modeling that I actually prefer this, or I'm going out with my friends tonight, or I'm going to take the night off, right? Like, I just think that's so important for them to see that my feelings matter too. And it's not like a comparison, like, oh, my feelings are more important than your feelings, right? Like, it's not like a comparison. It's just that I'm human too. And I think that's important for myself, but also for the kids to see that.
I could not agree with you more. And I'm going to take it even a step further in that kind of subject category is that I think it's so important as moms. We do, once we become a mom, and maybe even before that, we are so consumed with making everyone around us happy and doing, for a lot of us, and doing everything that we can for them and really kind of losing ourselves, losing our passions, losing our interests, losing our voice sometimes in the process. And I think that as moms establish this more self-confidence and are able to be more vocal about like, this is my me time and these are my passions and my interests, it's not only important to model it for our children, but we also need to understand that one of our goals as parents should be to raise really amazing humans. And that means that they are going to be independent and they're going to fly the nest. And we don't want to be sitting there after they're gone thinking, what do I do now? Like, I don't know who I am without catering to my children or to my spouse, because that's what I've done for so long. And I find that to be a really hard transition for a lot of women I talk to is when they get into that empty nesting stage, if they haven't built up their own interest and passions and things, they really suffer afterwards because they don't know what to do with all their time.
Yeah. And then it becomes a burden for the children. So then if the mom's going to visit all her kids in college or they have their own families and a mom's constantly, right? They're like, it's almost sad. Like they're like, oh, my mom doesn't have anything to do other than to take care of us, right? Like they almost like start to feel sorry for you. So yeah, it's like you don't want your kids to feel that way. You want your kids to be like, oh my gosh, my mom has a really cool life and she's off doing all these things and she's got her life and I've got mine, but we're still connected. And so yeah, it's definitely so important to remember because that's where dads don't really have this problem. They're always the men that they were, and they're also a father, and women just fall into that trap so often. And I know I can say that because I was one of them where I didn't know who I was if I wasn't a mom or a wife. There was this time in my life where I was like, oh my gosh, I have 4 kids. I don't know what else, right? And that's when I was like, that's exactly that time period when I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back to school. I got a master's degree. I got my coaching certifications. I started my own business. I got clients. And that just gave me so much personal satisfaction. But my identity was then different and my kids have something to look to. But not only that, because I realized, okay, there's the mom part of me, there's the work part of me, and then I have a significant other, that's part of me. But then also there's still more to that, right? There's still other passions and hobbies and interests and all those things.
Absolutely. I mean, as moms, we wear a lot of different hats, and we can be a great mom and still have a lot of different aspects to us as well. And we shouldn't feel guilty for that. We should feel prideful, again, because we're showing our kids, the beauty in having different passions and not being codependent necessarily in your relationship or just with your kids. And I started laughing when you were talking about moms really do get the burden a lot of the time. And of course, this podcast is called Mom Essential, so mostly moms listen to it, but I've had some amazing dads on here too. And I think there's some great tips throughout the episodes that dads can pull from. But I remember being on a podcast, someone else's podcast, and he was interviewing me, and we got to the question about mom guilt. And I was kind of explaining it. And then he was like, well, what about dad guilt? Why don't you talk about dad guilt? And I was like, it's because it's not really a thing most of the time.
Not a thing. It doesn't exist.
I don't want to stereotype. I know some amazing dads, especially like single dads who do an incredible job. And I know that they can as well. But I think just in our society, moms typically get into the role of, well, yeah, you're the mom, you're the event planner, you're the taxi driver, you're the sports coordinator, you're all of these things. Whereas again, in a majority of relationship, the dad doesn't have as much of that burden on him as is expected of the mom in a typical heterosexual relationship.
Which is even why it's so even more important, right, to have that own identity. Because if you just think about it, also like when if you have a daughter or a son, it doesn't matter, when they grow up, you don't want your son to expect his wife to be this nothing else, and you don't want your daughter to be this person that's constantly serving and not doing yourself, right? So the self-compassion, treat yourself the way you would want your daughter or someone else to be treated.
Yeah, part of my calm approach, the M stands for mindful modeling. And I totally agree with you on like making sure we're modeling it no matter what the sex of our children are. Because I also have a boy and a girl. They're twins. So, yes, they have some similarities, but a lot of differences as well. And I think that it is equally important to showcase, like for me and my husband, the message of teamwork, not just for our daughter, but also more importantly almost sometimes for me for our son, so that he doesn't get into a type of relationship where it's very uneven, or he thinks that
Yeah.
if he marries a wife, that's just her duties. I want to make sure no matter who my kids end up with, that they see it as a partnership, which I don't think necessarily it's always going to be 50-50, because in a partnership sometimes you have to pick up for the slack a little bit, but I want them to see that it doesn't have to be like mostly on their counterpart, that they should take equal share of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. And one of the things, and we talked a lot about like how finding our independence as mom and as women is really good for our children, especially because at some point, hopefully they will be leaving the nest. And I think one of the fears that a lot of parents have though is like, well, I just want to make sure my kids still want to talk to me and I want to be connected with them. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of people find in these teen years, because teens come home and you ask them, how was your day? Fine. Anything cool happen at school today? No. And they give us these one short answers, right? So can you give some tips on how we can start building that connection at home so that it continues to build into adulthood?
Yes, yes. So I think that word connection is very important, but also then to ask why. So are you wanting that because you're lonely,
Mhm.
because you need someone to talk to? Like, is it about you? Is it because you haven't talked to anybody all day and then your kids come home and you desperately need a conversation? Or is it like, truly because you want to bridge that gap? You want to be close to them. You want them to feel loved, right? So first things first, like, is it the right reasons? And second, yeah, I have 4 kids. They all have different personalities. One of them is a man of few words. One of my sons is a man of few words. I don't get a whole lot out of him, but I think what's cool with him is that sometimes we do get into these hour-long conversations where it gets really, really deep. He's not big on the small talk, right? So he's like, I don't want to, but once I kind of get him going and I get him to open up, that does happen. Both of my girls, but specifically my oldest daughter, she'll tell me anything. Like it's almost TMI. I didn't need to know that, right? Yeah, so it's like I kind of have the gamut as far as a mom, but when I'm coaching parents, I think it's important to not pressure or force your child. Like if they're not in the mood,
Yeah.
don't force it. Don't make them. It's like, that turtle that goes into its shell. And the more, if you knock on the shell, that doesn't mean they're going to want to come out, right? Like sometimes it has to be on their own time in their own place, like whatever, like the important vibe is that they're needing to feel. And the most important thing to kind of facilitate that happening is just the feeling of safeness. And so, what does that mean? It means they don't feel judged. It means that you're not giving unsolicited advice. That means that you're not trying to change them. That means that as they're forming their own identity and becoming their own person, that you don't disagree with that. I see this as a big, big problem where, how when you go through different phases and you're like, oh, I'm going through my goth phase right now, or now they call it emo, right? It's like, that doesn't mean that's who they're going to be dressing like that forever. Or, oh, I'm going through my country music phase. That doesn't mean they're going to be, right? They're just trying something out. They're just experimenting. And so like when a teenager like finally is like, okay, guess what? This is a new song I like because you asked me because you're trying to connect with me. And then I say, well, why are you blah, 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 right? Like then of course they're going to go back in their shell. Right? Like nobody wants to expose themselves and feeling vulnerable. It's like such a vulnerable experience when they feel like anything that they say is going to be somehow criticized or attacked.
Yeah. And I was giggling again because I was like, oh my gosh, I think we all went through some of those phases when we were teens, and we're so fortunate that there wasn't social media back then to remind us how kids are going to be reminded today. But I loved how you were explaining the differences between your children, because I think that's something that a lot of parents lose sight of, is that all of our children are so uniquely different. They're their own beings, they need different tools. So again, at the Parent Toolbox, I really work with parents to try build up their parenting toolbox with all different kinds of strategies, because again, even having twins, I know I need to use different tools for my daughter than I need to use for my son, even if I am trying to get the same result out of it.
Mm.
And so I think again that as moms, a lot of the time, because we do have so much on our plate, because we run at high capacity a majority of the time, we lose that ability to remember what it was like when we were teenagers, to remember how awkward we felt and when we were trying new things. If our parents, gave us grief about it or pushed back on it, it didn't want us to open up more. It just helped. It made us become that turtle, right? Where we're like, well, I'm just going to go into this shell because you don't understand me. And so I'm glad that you just represented that every child is so different and needs different things, and they are going to go through different phases of life. And yeah, again, I think it's just those little reminders. And one thing that you referred to in the beginning that I wanted to circle back to again is this whole idea of like, sometimes our kids just want this space to vent, and other times they want a solution, but we need to make sure that we're giving them the opportunity to tell us what they need. And I like to call that the help versus herd method. So literally saying, do you want me just to listen, or would you like me to help you come up with ideas on how to solve this, can be such a world of difference for our kids.
Yes, I love all your terms and acronyms and everything. They're so helpful. But yeah, I don't have exact scientific research on the number of this, but if I had a guess, I would say over 90% of the time they're just needing to vent for teenagers. That is, I can't speak for the younger ones, but it's a very much higher number. They're very rarely actually looking for help or solution. And so, yeah, I've taught when I coach families, I teach both the teenager this to kind of express the need. And then I also teach the parents, is it that, like you said, are you needing help? Or are you needing to be heard? Right? Like those two options. So that way everybody's on the same page. And it makes as the parent, listening to the venting much easier to stomach, because sometimes it can be pretty emotional and it can rattle your nervous system, right? Like, say you've had a long, busy, stressful day, and then your teenager needs to come home and rant, and you haven't had a chance to like settle yourself yet. Even if you haven't had that chance and you're trying to just take your deep breath while you're listening, even if you can remind yourself, okay, this is a rant, I don't actually need to do anything here other than to just listen. That's my only job.
Yeah.
Right. And so it kind of makes it a little bit easier when you're like, okay, my only job here is to listen, reflect, show empathy. And it's not that hard. It's really not that hard. So yeah, to kind of just, and then sometimes it's okay to say, I have had a rough day. I hear you're having a stressful moment. Can you just give me 5 minutes so I can settle myself into the house, because I just walked in the door too? And then I can come back and listen to you. And yeah, that's probably a great way to do it too, right? Like there doesn't have to be a right or a wrong. It all depends on the moment, because sometimes it might happen in the car and they're only with you for 10 minutes and they just need to get something off their chest real quick. And then they hop out of the car and go off their merry way. So, right. Like then we can put our needs later, like we can settle ourselves later if we need to.
Yeah. Well, I think that should give a sigh of relief to everyone who's watching or listening to this episode, is that we don't have to have everything figured out in the moment. Like, we don't have to have all the answers. We know that we're probably not going to do it perfectly, and that's okay. But we can take a step back, and we don't need to fill in the silence or to give those options right away. Because I know through my own work of things that I've carried from my childhood into my adulthood and into my motherhood, is that I was very easy to go into the fixer mode, where I was like, okay, this is the problem. Like, here's the ABC. And it very rarely works, because you're right. Sometimes they just want that space to be held for them so that they know it's a safe space for them to come to next time. And I always say, like, even if I get weirded out by the questions my kids ask me, or they bring up a topic where I'm like, whoa, you are way too young to be even knowing about that, I would rather them come to me, especially later with other problems, versus going to their peers, because I know the information I got from my peers when I was a teenager probably was not the best or the most accurate. So,
Yeah.
it's again just creating that safe space. But Laura, I really want to make sure we get into, because I'm very interested to find out about what exactly is the decider and why did you create it for teens?
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for asking me about that. I am super excited about it. I knew I wanted to just go directly to the source. So I do coach clients one-on-one, but that's just one person at a time. And so I've done I've done a few workshops where, an organization will call me in and come in for an hour or 45 minutes and give some information about how to deal with stress and overwhelm of just kind of daily life of what it's like to be a teenager. So I do give them some tools, but I wanted something bigger. Like I was just thinking, I have this grand vision of really impacting teens no matter where they're at. So I think of kind of like mental health and wellness as being on a spectrum. And there are some kids who are doing great, like they're handling life pretty well. And they've got a real supportive family. And so they're kind of just dealing with regular teenage struggles like family and my future and not family, friends, right? Even the mentally healthiest teenager still has those challenges. But then my talk kind of covers everything to the left of that. So it deals with stress, anxiety, overwhelm, even bullying, self-harm, and it goes even to touch on suicide.
Mm.
And so I thought, well, I knew when I was creating this, I was really like biting off a big bite of like, how can in one talk I cover all these things, meet teenagers where they're at, especially teenagers, which are I'm going who is a very hard audience to kind of have them buy in to what you're saying, right? So I have to like start this talk off with like immediately building rapport, get them to trust me, know that I'm on their side, right? So again, it was this big thing, but the decider is, so I teach the model, think, feel, do, have. So, our thoughts create our feelings create our behaviors create the results that we have in life. And those results go right back directly into creating those thoughts that we have and the beliefs that we have. And so I share a lot of stories from my childhood. And so I talk about when I was 5, when I was 13, when I was 15, when I was 17, and then when I was in my 20s, and the decisions that I made. And I basically tell this story, and I wish I had had these tools back then, the things that I talk about in my speech. But I also let them know they don't have to go through and because most of the time I'm speaking at like middle school, high school, they don't have to go into their 20s and realize they don't have this in their control. The thing is, they do have it in their control. They do have the ability to change their thoughts. So I talk about think differently, which is just kind of reframing our thoughts into a more positive feeling. Feel deeply, which is having that self-compassion. If you're having a bad day, know that it's okay and that you'll make it through. And then be courageous and have that confidence. And I talk about confidence building tools. And then that last part is the have. That's like the result. So basically I say you don't have to like wait 20 years or 30 years or 40 years to be able to like get a grip on your life. Like you can start doing this now. Exactly. And so and that's why it's called a decider, because you can decide today, you can decide now to start doing these things.
Yeah, I love that. And how powerful, again, for kids who are younger to hear this. I know that my business was kind of formatted or kind of founded on the fact that I went through my own kind of personal healing journey and learned more about how to deal with our mental health and our emotions. And as I shared more information about that, I continuously heard from moms like, why didn't we know this? Like, why am I in my 30s or my 40s or my 50s that I'm hearing this for the first time? And why are we not teaching our kids this? And that's how I felt going through my journey too, is I was like, wait, if I would have had these tools 15 years ago, like what an impact this would have made on just my overall life. And so I love that you're out there getting in front of those teens, which you said are not always the easiest to talk to or to capture their attention, but really connecting with them on that one-on-one level, because sometimes we can, again, just kind of bypass them and be like, oh, they're just a teenager, like they're just hormonal, they don't want to talk, and then we forget to do that connection with them. So that's amazing work that you're doing, and I absolutely love it. Now, I know as well, for everyone who has stuck around and is still listening to the podcast, you do have a free offer for our parents as well, which is the 5 tips to cracking the parent code. So can you share with my listeners a little bit more about why they want to go download that?
Yes, absolutely. So it's just a great resource for, print it out or keep it on the PDF on your computer to refer to, because, I'm talking about these things and kind of everything I'm saying because it's my job and I do it every day. And it's very easy for me to know the right response at the right time. Or maybe I don't always have the perfect response, because sometimes there is no perfect response. But I like to give parents just like, it's like a cheat sheet where, okay, this is what I need to do. This is step one. This is step two. This is step three. This is how to handle this. This is how to create that space for them, and also be able to put things in perspective. So, sometimes we as moms, we're so empathetic. And when our kids are in pain, we're in pain. And so sometimes we kind of like go to their level. Oh, they didn't make the volleyball team. Oh my gosh, they're devastated. And so now I'm devastated because they're devastated. And when you're devastated, that's not helping them. Like, it's actually just making things really honestly worse. And so it's really about, these 5 tips are about how you can kind of remain kind of composed yourself. And it doesn't mean your feelings don't matter, but it's to know your role at that moment. And your role is to be that steady, strong strength. And so, yes, I love my 5 tips. They're so great for any parent. So yes, I appreciate you reminding us about that, because yeah, it's so great to go back to those basics.
Awesome. Again, listeners, there's going to be a link in the show notes. So you're definitely going to want to go grab up those 5 tips, super simple and easy. So you can learn more about Laura and you can get connected with her as well. Her contact information is going to be in there. And I just, again, really want to pinpoint something that you said there is you said, we might not always have it perfect. And even though you do this work, it comes a little bit more second nature to you. But again, I'm sure there's times when your kids come to you and you're like, oh man, I have to go into my own toolbox that I teach other people in order to make it through this moment. And I like to remind parents all of the time that it took us a lot of little steps to get to where we are, and it's going to take us a lot of little steps to get us to where we want to be, and that's okay. Anything that, where we want to go, it might take some time, but we're going to get there if we stay consistent and we just keep practicing it. And we're all human, so we're not going to get it perfect all of the time. So thank you so much, Laura, for joining me today and sharing all of this wisdom. Again, listeners, head to the show notes, get connected with Laura, go download those 5 tips, and of course, stick around for the Essential Minute coming up next, and we will see you next time on Mom Essentials. Hey, thanks for sticking around for the Essential Minute. All right, let's talk about balance. After today's conversation, this one feels especially important because when we're talking about reducing power struggles with our teens, so much of that starts with us. How we show up, how we respond, and whether we're regulated or not in those moments. And let's be honest, those moments, well, they can feel intense. Balance is known as the grounding blend, and it's designed to help create a sense of calm, stability, and emotional balance, which is exactly what we need when our teen is overwhelmed, shutting down, or coming at us with big emotions. You can apply it to the bottom of your feet in the morning, roll it onto your wrist before a conversation, or use it as a reset after a tough interaction. Because when we're grounded, we're able to pause, we're able to listen instead of react, and we're able to create that safe space Laura and I talked about in this episode. And at the end of it, that's what help reduces power struggles. It's not about saying the perfect thing, it's about being in the right state to respond. If you're interested in adding this to your parenting toolbox, head to the show notes to find out more. Happy oiling! Thanks for listening to this episode of Mom Essentials. If you're looking for simple ways to bring more communication, connection, and calm into your home, head to theparenttoolbox.info and check out the Calm Family Planner. And as a special thanks for being a listener, you can take $5 off with the code ESSENTIALS. That's code ESSENTIALS. Want more tips